Well, hello. Welcome back to the Prolific Author Podcast. I hope everyone is having a wonderful week of writing. Today, I have a really fun interview for you with author Dan Petrosini. He is really good about managing his time and figuring out how to write as many books as suits him and his lifestyle every year, and not pushing himself too hard if it gets to the point where it's too stressful and he doesn't want to write that much anymore. So I think he's got a lot of really valuable things to say. He's also going to talk a lot about writing dialogue and how to become really skilled at that, listening for what sounds realistic, and even taking into account how you write your dialogue tags and how that kind of might affect your audiobooks. Okay, so we have a really good conversation, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind you about the Finding the Heart of Your Story Bootcamp. It's happening August 22nd through 26th, so if you're listening to this after that, it might be over, but if you're listening to this in real time, make sure and go register for it at bit.ly/storyheart. Make sure and capitalize the S and the H so you don't get an error message. It's going to be held inside the Prolific Author Community, which is my free Facebook group for authors. So if you have not joined that, you can also go and search for the Prolific Author in Facebook groups, then it should pop right up. We are going to be learning lots of really valuable things, how to drill down to the core of the story that you are trying to tell, how to get a really good authoritative grip on it so that you can bring it across well on the page. There are specific, tricks and tips for doing that a lot of authors don't take advantage of, okay? We're going to learn about crowdsourcing creativity. You probably don't know what that is, but you're going to have to go to the boot camp to figure it out. And let's see what else. We're also going to talk about marketing, using the intro to market, which is a lot more effective than using the plot alone. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you want to up-level your craft or your marketing at all, this is the bootcamp for you. Make sure and go sign up, especially if you want me to be sending you the replays. You're going to need to register. Once again, that's bit.ly/storyheart with the S and the H capitalized. Okay, I think that's all I have in terms of business for this week. And without further ado, let's get into the interview with Dan. Okay, so we are here with author Dan Petrosini. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing wonderful and appreciate the opportunity to chat with you this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. So why don't you start by telling everyone who you are and what you write?
Well, I'm Dan Petrosini, born in New York City and now living in Southwest Florida. I'm an author of somewhere a couple of dozen books at this point. And I think my most popular series is the Luca Mystery series. And I also play the saxophone in a number of jazz bands, and nice. I drink too much wine.
Isn't it funny how when you get past a certain number of books, you can never remember how many you have? I always think that I should know how many books I have, and I usually don't.
Yeah, people do ask,
Yeah.
And I'm always like, I have to try to do a mental count.
Yeah.
I just say over 2 dozen kind of covers it.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. So do you have any, specific secret for how prolific you are and how you get your writing done? That much? I mean, that's more books than most authors will put out in their lifetime. So what's your secret?
Well, it's really no secret. And this is something you have to commit to doing it. If you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. A lot of people say they like to do something, they're going to do something, but they never take the steps necessary to get them to the finish line. So people set goals, but they don't set the plan to achieve the goal. And when it comes down to something like writing, if you sit around waiting for inspiration, you're going to be sitting by yourself quite a long time. I found that the best way to do it, and I'm certainly not alone, much more successful authors realize that you do have to approach it like a job. And we don't like to mix the word job with the creative world, right? It kind of is a big clash there. But at the end of the day, it is a job. If you're doing this full time, you have to sit down every morning or whatever time that you do it. Some people are night people. I flip-flop, which is kind of unusual, but one thing I make sure I do is every single day I write. Every single day. I mean, and I realize I'm in a fortunate situation being able to do that. However, my advice to any aspiring writer is that even if you have, if you're a single mom with 3 kids, whatever your situation is, that, or you have a real job, most people are writing on a part-time basis or trying to squeeze it in. You still have to be able to set a time aside, and whether that is, 2 hours once a week or even 30 minutes a day, make sure you do it every day. And once it
Right.
becomes habitual, it becomes part of your routine, and bingo. Next thing you know, the pages start adding up. Or I say words, the words add up. So that's the quote unquote secret. There is no secret.
No, I totally agree. I think that's something that it's kind of a major misconception in the author space in general, that you only write when the muse shows up, or you're going to get this massive lightning strike idea that'll just be wonderful and then you can get it written. But really, I mean, the people who are really successful in this space are people that write every day, and I hate to use the word grind, but to some extent, just like any job, you're going to have your bad days when you don't want to write, and you're going to have your good days, and you got to kind of push through them. I mean, I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Exactly. And there are those rare times. Yesterday I was writing, and I actually had a little bit of a flow going for a while. But in general, you have to, I hate it, it sounds terrible, you have to force the words out. And one of the things that I found is when I originally started doing this, I don't know, let's say 7 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever. And I was having difficulty writing, and I forced, I just said, let me just put something on the page. Let me put something on the page, because as the industry likes to say, right, you can't fix what's not written. So you could fix something that's there,
Right.
or change it around. But if you have nothing, if you have a blank page, you can't massage that, if you will. So when I started to force it out, and I was a little skeptical, and I did it. And then when I started to go back, because I basically write and don't read it. I never go back. I'm not one of those folks. And I know it sounds like great practice where they write whatever they write. If you write 1,000 words today, tomorrow they go back 500 words, they read it, edit it, and then continue. And that's great. I get it. I don't work that way. But what I do is occasionally, during writing a book, right now I'm about 45,000 words into another book. And I've been to when I was somewhere around maybe 35,000, I went back to the beginning and read it, doing a little bit of editing and trying to get back into the story, trying to make sure I didn't leave too many holes, and also planting seeds that I needed to have earlier. And you realize when you go back that I can't tell where it was forced and where it supposedly flowed. It's the same quality. So even though it's harder to get out, there's no difference in quality. I think that's what I've discovered, So forcing it out is something you got to do.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also one of those things, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So, it's just a matter of practicing too.
Right. And the other things that I'm sure you've encountered is many times I write. I'm what they call a discovery writer. I'm not really big on plotting, and usually have a general idea, and then I just go. I just lost the train of thought. Geez. Oh,
that's okay. Well, go ahead. Did you figure it out?
It's very common that when you approach it that way, when you're writing without a real plot, you're gonna not a real plot, but without an outline, you're gonna get yourself in a corner, and you go, geez, how am I? Where do I go now? And you can't resolve this problem with the plot. So what I found for me is that I can't figure out how to get around this, So I put it aside and I write something that needs to be written anyway. That there's this other part of the book that needs to be written that's going to happen 3 days after the problem that you're trying to fix. And I write that, and then of course I kind of trust myself to come up with the solution. And this way I don't have myself this excuse not to write. That I'm going to write. I'm going to write something different. I'm going to allow my subconscious if you will, and mull around ways to get past this problem. But I'm not going to waste time. I'm still accomplishing something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really like that. I think that's the best way to approach it, because it's almost like, you know, your brain will solve it for you when it's on the back burner and you're focusing on something else. So let me ask you, do you, when that happens, do you write the later scene and then reverse engineer, or is it more a matter of writing the later scene and then it just eventually comes to you how to solve the problem?
Yeah, I'm writing a later scene, not with the intention of trying to find a solution to the problem that I have, you know, earlier in the book, and it's not magic, right? When I wake up most mornings, I stay in bed and I try to clear my mind. And if I have a particular problem with the story I'm writing, I try to seed it in my mind, but I don't consciously try to find the solution. It's kind of a weird thing. I don't try to solve it. I make my mind aware. Like, how would I, you know, can they meet at a funeral? Can they meet at a amusement park? So if you need to get two characters to get together, it's one thing. How are we going to get Jane? You know, you don't want to have these very convenient coincidences. You know, the reader sees right through those, right?
Right.
So those let's say that's one example of getting two characters, and then I just try to seed a bunch of things in my head, and I lay there for a while, and then I just get up and go about my day. Maybe, you know, in the morning I usually take a walk, and even though I'm not thinking about it, your mind is, you know, and then you find that you have, let's say, 5 or 4 different ways of solving the problem, and then that's when you now start massaging them actively. Or how I do it, rather, how I try to actively figure out what's going to really, what's the one of those possible solutions that's going to work for this particular story.
Right. No, I think that's great, because it's been proven, and it's usually not, you know, applied to writing specifically, but that you can kind of solve problems like that with your subconscious mind. And when you're trying to force it consciously, that's when you kind of get stuck. You know, that's why people come up with like their best ideas in the shower or when they're going walking or whatever. So I really love that you apply that to writing. And I think more authors should do that rather than, you know, like trying to force it all the time.
Yeah. One of the other things that I've been able to do, and again, maybe it is as a result of being able to complete so many novels, is to trust yourself, you know, trust yourself, and not, because I used to panic. You know, like everyone else, like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I'm going to have to start over. This is going to be another one of those stories that's going to be in my desk drawer with the other 30 that I never get finished, and all that type of thing. And then I started to slowly realize that, gosh, I have been able to fix these problems. I have been able to get to the end of a book, and people like it. So rather than going into a panic, I just say, hey, you're going to get it done. You're going to find a way around this. Trust yourself to get it done. And that anxiety dissipates to a certain degree. It doesn't never goes away, but it dissipates to a certain degree, and leaves more room for the quote unquote creative process, I believe, anyway.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, you know, fear and doubt, that's just going to always make you get stuck, you know, even if you have a really great idea for a story. So yeah, I totally agree.
Oh yeah, no, look, I mean, the voice in your head is the most important voice that you'll ever hear, and you better make sure that it's a friend and not an enemy, because everyone, including myself, have tons of self-doubt. I mean, so you gotta, yeah, right, and you know, they especially in the publishing business, you know, people talk about the imposter syndrome, right? You know, can I do it again? I did it once. And you always have that little bit of fear when you go like, oh my gosh, we finished that book, and now what? Can I do that again? Oh my gosh, you know, it took so much effort. So trust yourself.
I love that. So good. So can I ask you, do you write a certain number of words every day? Do you have like a quota that you try to hit, or?
Yes, I have. This particular book, is the one I'm writing now, is a little more difficult, because I usually have not a really good idea, in my opinion. A good idea, like a good idea. And I go, wow, this is good. And then I kind of sketch it out in my head. Okay, I know these 5 or 6 things have to happen. And sometimes I write in Scrivener. So I go to Scrivener and I use that not chalkboard, the bulletin board, whatever it is. And I usually put, 6 or 7 or 10 chapter headings, not much information that, he gets in a car accident, this, whatever types of little notes to myself.
Right.
In this one, I didn't do it. I had one idea and I just didn't feel like it was strong enough. I was trying to make it stronger. And I said, I got it. And I was very uncomfortable not writing, right? After I finished the last book, I was, how all of a sudden, you send it off to the editor, and now what do I do? I didn't have, usually I have an idea right away that I start on, and I didn't have it. So I said to myself that, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start writing and see how it goes. And as I was doing, I added another kind of like a dual plot thing going on. So it's been a little bit more difficult to me, but normally I try to write at least 1,000 words a day.
Okay.
And that's what I try to do. And I haven't been able to do it many times in let's say the 6 weeks that I've been writing this book. But yesterday was a good day. Yesterday I had like about 1,600. So made up a little for it, right? So 1,000 a day is the goal. I mean, I'm in awe when I hear some of these people that write, 5,000, 10,000 words a day. I just don't know how. But I will say one thing. Sorry about that. One thing I would say, that I've been able to do is that my first draft are pretty good nowadays. Yeah. My first draft, I think it just comes with experience, right?
I do too.
So now when I write, So I write my, let's say I got my, whatever it is. I write mostly, in the crime fiction, mystery type genre. And my novels are somewhere around 75,000 words, something like that. So I usually get it to 78,000 and the story's ended, wherever it needs to end. It's not dependent by word count. And then when I go back, let's say when I'm finally done with the first draft, I go back and I go through it. And usually what I'm doing is cutting, just trimming, getting rid of stuff that's not necessary. During that process, I really am not fixing many problems. Sometimes I have 1 or 2 problems. I know that I go, hey, I gotta, whatever, this guy, XYZ has to happen to this character. So I have to change a couple of sentences here and there to make it. But generally my first drafts are pretty good, pretty strong. And then I go through it again, and then I send it off to the editor. And then usually the editor's been coming back, with not too much, not like in some cases where, I need to lay in bed for 2 weeks after I get, after you get beat up.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that comes with experience too. You just get better at the first draft and better at knowing, what's going to need to be fixed. So you fix it the first time. So do you get a book written like every, 2 months then? If you're doing about 75,000 words?
I'm not that fast. I usually, right now, I mean, I've slowed down a little bit. I have slowed down a little bit. It just have. I mean, I was doing 3 a year. Okay. In other words, put out. And one time I think I did 4. I just wasn't. I felt like I was pushing myself too hard, frankly. That's all. I just felt. I do enjoy writing. And even at times that it's difficult, but I don't want to make it, excruciating. So,
and can I ask, do you still work a full-time job, or are you a full-time writer?
No, this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Good. Good.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. It's anyway, it's been working out. It's been working out and I'm enjoying it. It's fun and it is challenging. I mean, let's face it. It's challenging and, and all the other things that go on to it, it's unfortunate that you just can't write the book and then, everything else takes care of itself. But, for instance, marketing, it's just, sucks up so much time. I mean, I guess today, Monday, so I guess it was Saturday, I basically hardly wrote. And because I spent a lot of time, because it was the end of the month on all my advertising, going through the AMS, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
so.
I do that too. I try to, a lot of times I try to batch it. But yeah, when you do that, you end up spending like 8 hours a day on it. So yeah, it's crazy.
And even, and it's hard to feel good about it. When, at least when again, whatever it is that your goal is for that day in writing, for me, it's 1,000 when I pass it. And, I can look back, 3 hours later and go, wow, I don't stop when I get to 1,000. That's not what I do, but
right.
I just like, okay, I'm done. I'm exhausted, whatever, mentally. And then I stop, and hopefully I do track my words as I'm going along, Gosh,
yeah, no, that's good. That's a good practice. Yeah.
Yeah, just to try to, touch base with where I am and what I think I am. And usually that's the funny thing now. Usually I try to play a little game with myself as I'm writing, and whatever it is, I'm sitting down there for an hour. And sometimes that hour you can pump out, 600 words. Sometimes you put out 189. And
right. Yeah.
when I go to check my word count, I go to myself, okay, that was about 200. And you put it up and it's like 203. And you go, oh my God, I'm checking too often, I think,
Yeah.
But when you do write and the day's done and you put your time in, whether or not the words are there or not, you feel a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas if I'm spending, 4 hours messing around with my Amazon ads and trying to figure out, I never feel good about it.
Right.
But that's the necessary part of the business,
For sure. So if we can switch gears just a little bit, you are pretty good at writing dialogue. So can we talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what are your dialogue writing secrets or practices?
I think the most important thing that you could do is basically observation. And that's like a lost art these days, right? Because everybody wants to talk, right? Especially if you're sitting there with 2 or 3 of your friends, just whatever it is, having a drink somewhere. I got to tell you this, and we're so apt to want to be a part of the conversation. It's very interesting when you pull yourself back a little bit and let your 2 friends or whoever these people are talk and listen to how they talk, and not, of course, give your opinion, which is a difficult thing for me to keep in my pocket. But if you do that, you'll learn. You don't have to learn. Excuse me. You know how to talk. We do. We don't think about it. It just happens, right? Not like writing on it. When you're writing, you have to think about what you're going to write. When I'm talking to you, right, I'm not thinking. It's just coming out. But you couldn't put that on the page in a story sense, because we repeat ourselves. We do all those, right? We do all those types of things. But that's part of dialogue, and you have to put that into your writing, because people talk differently than you write. We know that.
Right.
So, just as a silly thing, because I just did this 5 seconds ago, and I realized myself, I said to my wife, "How you feeling?" Right? But when we write, we want to say, "How are you feeling?"
Right.
We do not talk that way. I mean, at least people from Brooklyn, I grew up with a lot of colorful characters who had their own language, right? The street language, and people talk, and I still can't get rid of my New York accent. But we do talk differently. Like, one of the other things is let's say contractions, right? In dialogue, you constantly, I don't say like, can you make it tonight? I cannot. You say, I can't, and we truncate it, The other thing is, let's say in dialogue where you're talking to somebody, we have to say, what? Even though you heard what the person said, you say, what? You're either buying yourself time or you want to ignore the subject. And the other thing that people do when we're talking about it, and it doesn't work, it doesn't appear correct. And, it's difficult to do, where they just change subjects like, at the drop of a hat. When
Mhm.
you're in a conversation, you know, especially with more than one person, and those are really tough too. Writing a scene with several people in a room is really difficult.
It is,
And
yeah.
I learned my lesson, early on. I had wrote a political thriller way back when, and of course, you're in the cabinet room wherever these politicians get together, and you got the secretary XYZ, and and there's 12 people in a room, and to try to have a back and forth conversation. I know they happen, but it doesn't really get to do it on the written page is very, very difficult, very difficult. So I would try to limit the number of characters in a particular scene if you're able to. And the genres that I am able to do, I do that. And many times, like in detective fiction, for instance, we have two partners working together and they go to interview a subject. Sometimes I purposely leave one of the guys out,
Mm,
just so that it's a one-on-one.
right.
Otherwise, you need more dialogue
So
tags.
yeah, tags are important. So if you were, giving advice to kind of, up and coming authors about, how to learn to write dialogue, what would you suggest? Would you suggest that they take time to observe other people's dialogue, or what else?
1,000%.
Yeah.
When you read, right? We're all, of course, what author is not a big reader?
Right.
And when you read, sometimes when the dialogue is like almost too formal,
Mhm.
it pulls me out of the story. And look,
Right.
I'm not saying we all know, right? And using dialogue, the speech, and I'm not the best at it either, but they should be able to tell who it is that's speaking by the type of words that they use, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the ways that we can distinguish our characters. Of course, a doctor is going to speak differently than, let's say, a plumber, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So, even the words that they use just to say, "Hey, doc, I feel sick," and and he's not going to say you're sick. He doesn't use that word, a doctor. They're going to use different words to describe what's going on. Then,
Right.
so that's a real easy one, right? A lawyer will talk differently than. And the other thing that's very, very interesting, and I observe it in myself, is that people change their speech depending upon the people they're with.
Mhm. Yeah.
You find yourself, I'm not a cursor. I don't curse. I don't feel real comfortable. I said I don't curse. I try not to curse. And I rarely use it in my books. I just don't feel comfortable with
Right.
it. However, there are characters that, throw F-bombs left and right, and you can't take somebody who's, let's say, a confidential informant, and expect him to speak like the priest.
Right.
It's,
Right.
so, and those are advantages, again, to describe characters, or to show character, rather. Who is
Mhm.
this? Dialogue tags are, I'm really down to he said, she said things. That's it. I very rarely say, I don't know, in response,
Right. Yeah.
some other way that actually pulls you out. And what I realize how dangerous those tags are and how terrible they sound in audiobooks. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when it's going back and forth like real quick, where conversations are kind of using real short sentences between two people. And then he said this, and no, she said, why not? And it's just like, oh, it sounds terrible in an
Yeah.
audiobook. You can get away with it because it almost becomes a little invisible on the page,
Mhm.
but I think it really, harms an audio production.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So first
authors
and
are having to
foremost,
think about that more and more now.
yes, yeah, it's a part. And again, I had one particular. It was a cold case that I had wrote on, and the new detective takes over the case, and he's reading an interview between a police, a detective, and this young kid. He's trying, you know, there's 25 years later, and the back and forth with the he, you know, it was like, oh my gosh. As soon as I heard it, you know, as soon as I got the clip or whatever you want to call it, the chapter from the narrator, I was like, oh man, we got to go back and we got to get rid of this, you know. And it just kind of reinforced the idea in my head that you have to figure out, people have to know who's talking. You can't confuse a reader.
Right.
But you don't need, you know, line by line, you know. What I usually do is I count sometimes when I go, you know, who said this and how many times back and forth. I go, okay, after like 5 times, we may need to put something in there. And I try to do it with you know, maybe some physical thing happening.
Right.
You know, Derek came over to my desk, you know, and said this, and, you know, during the conversation, he's moving, or he put a cup of coffee on my table or something, just to try to reinforce who it is without the he said, she said tag. But again, I think number one, you know, we don't talk the way we write, and you know, sometimes the editors, by the way, if you say how you feeling, they'll come back and or a proofreader will put R in it, you know, how are you feeling? Now you have to make a decision, you know, do I accept that or not?
Right.
And the other thing that's a little dangerous, and you may have encountered this as well, is that you'll get some reviews from people if you try to make it too streety, you know, where, you know, his grammar's terrible. The grammar's terrible. But people, the readers are, in my opinion, are ignorant of the fact that if it's dialogue, you can get away with it, man. That's that's the way it should be. So don't give me. I've become a little gun shy. You know, I've because I've gotten reviews that were negative, or communication from people through emails, whatever, and say, hey, you know, you should fix this, and you know, I go like, you know, that's dialogue, man. These are two people talking. That's the way we talk. You know, so I wouldn't overdo it. And the other thing with dialogue is I would not get too, what is it called, in a dialect. You know, how some, you know, you can sprinkle a little bit in the beginning, and then people will maybe hear that Irish lilt that you're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to read, you know, constantly.
It is.
So, you know, make the plan.
I agree with that.
Yeah, right. I mean, so we talk differently than we write and read. So be conscious of that, and just pay attention. Pay attention tonight when 2 people talk, and just listen.
Yeah, I think that's all really, really great advice. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for being here. This has been a really great conversation. Can you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your books?
Well, the easiest place is www at my website, danpetrosini.com. Of course, on Amazon, I'm all over the place, and Facebook, Dan Petrosini. And so I hope to see you there.
Great. Yeah, I will make sure and link those all up in the show notes. We just have a couple of minutes here left. What do you think is the best advice you got as a kind of a newbie author that you would pass on to authors who are just starting out?
Well, one of the things that I regret, and I was just actually talking to someone about it just the other day, was genre hopping. Now, I actually, you know, I commend you for the way you approach that, because, well, let me explain my first of all, when I started writing, I wrote like a kind of a coming of age story first, then I think maybe it was a political thriller, and then I wrote a crime story, and then I wrote a sci-fi book, and I was having fun, you know, but I wasn't building readership. No one knew who I was. I was all over the map. You know, is this guy a mystery writer? Is he a thriller political writer? What is he? A sci-fi writer? And certainly not a sci-fi guy. But if you're going to do that, you have to do what you did, which is to have a separate author name for, or I know what you did. You know, an iteration of your name, if you will. So that readers, a mystery reader, generally doesn't cross genres too much, right? I mean, they're not going to. Most readers, right? So I would say stick to a genre, and if you're going to another genre, get a different pen name.
Yeah.
Right. That's number one. Yeah. And the other thing that I realized that helped me gain traction was writing in a series. Now, I heard people talk about this, but as a reader, curiously, I am not a series reader. You know, I don't like cliffhangers, all that type of stuff. And I like to read what I feel like, whatever catches my attention. Although I'm generally, you know, generally it's always crime or mystery suspense type of stuff.
Right.
But I realized that a lot of readers are series readers and they love series. And number one, and secondarily, they won't even take a shot on a series unless there's several books in the series.
Right.
So that was another very helpful piece. I finally listened to what people were telling me, and I said, okay, let me stick in a series. Let me find some. And I was lucky that I found the character that kind of I wanted to write. You know, so he was able to. This guy Frank Luca was the guy that said, okay, I can do it with somebody like him. And because I enjoy exploring his character and the situation and his view of the world, if you will. So I would say the two things: number one, pick a genre that you enjoy writing, and then create a series. You know, I think that'll get you much further than you know, doing the flavor of the month, so to speak.
Yeah. And you know, I really like the way you say that, because I think even though a lot of people will say write in a series, I think emphasizing a character that you really love is something people don't talk about too much. So I think that's really, really good advice.
Yeah, right. You can't just say I'm going to, you know, if you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time with this character, right? If you're going to be, I mean, this right now, I'm writing book 15 in the series, plus I have a prequel. So it's a pretty deep series. So I still have fun with this guy. And which I mean, I trust myself as the author, but I also trust him and where he's going to bring me. And also, you know, his life's partner. I trust her. Like I know kind of where these characters are going to go. And that's why I don't have to have such a detailed outline of what to do, because they're going to make me go right in a certain way. If you don't like the character, you're going to be miserable writing. And if you're not having fun writing, then I suggest, you know, you try something else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really great advice. Well, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you, and good luck with all your writing endeavors.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was great to have a chat with you, and I commend you on all the various author education projects that you're immersed in. So you're really doing a good service to the community.
Thank you.